Her night at the
Don't do
club
this.
turned deadly when the Alpha
Whatever he
King
told
set
you,
his
it isn't the
eyes
whole
on her.
story. You
Neon
have to
lights
trust me on
painted the
this.
concrete in shades of violet and gold, and the air carried a hum of music, laughter, and something else, something older, more dangerous. Alara walked beneath those lights, her heels clicking against the pavement as the invitation in her hand crumpled slightly from her grip. She had no idea why she had accepted it. The little card had simply arrived in her mailbox that morning, black with golden letters that read, "Tonight, come. Your destiny awaits." She had laughed at first, thinking it was a prank. But the way the city seemed to shift when she held the card, the way the neon flickered in her peripheral vision, it had drawn her. Now, standing before the entrance to a club she had never seen before, Ilara hesitated. The doorway was framed by dark steel, and inside, a pulsing wave of sound beckoned her. The beat was hypnotic, almost alive. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The club was nothing like she expected. It was enormous, stretching both upward and downward in ways that seemed impossible. The ceiling glittered with tiny, hanging lights that flickered like distant stars. Shadows moved along the walls in strange, fluid shapes. Music throbbed through her chest, and she could feel it in her bones. People danced and laughed, but there was an intensity in the air, a tension that made the ordinary seem impossible. Something about the place felt magical. Alara moved through the crowd, her senses alert. She was used to city nightlife, but this was different. Faces around her blurred, their features elongated and shifting as if the lights themselves were bending reality. And then, as if drawn by some invisible force, her eyes met his. He stood across the room at the edge of a shadowed balcony. His presence was undeniable, as if the music itself bent toward him. Kale. She didn't know his name yet, but she felt it in her bones. He was tall, with dark hair that fell around his sharp, regal features. His eyes were like molten gold, burning through the dim light and finding her as if he had been waiting for this very moment. Alara's heart stumbled. She tried to look away, but her feet refused to move. He watched her, his expression unreadable, and the world seemed to shrink until only the two of them existed. She felt a shiver run down her spine, not fear exactly, but an awareness that something beyond her understanding was stirring. The crowd shifted around her, the music pounding harder, and suddenly, Kale was moving. It was impossible. One moment he was on the balcony, the next he was at the edge of the dance floor, gliding toward her with a grace that seemed otherworldly. The air around him felt charged, as if he carried storms within him. Alara wanted to step back, but the pull toward him was stronger than her caution. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice deep and smooth, vibrating against her ears like a secret. I just came," she managed, her voice barely audible over the music. "You didn't just come," he said, and the corner of his lips lifted in a faint, unreadable smile. "You were called." Alara's brow furrowed. "Called." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. And then, without another word, he reached out. The tip of his fingers hovered just above hers, and in that moment the world seemed to stop. Time slowed. The music became distant, and all she could hear was the pulse of his presence, strong and relentless. A sudden commotion erupted near the bar. People screamed as shadows darted through the crowd, shapes too quick and fluid to be human. Something attacked, moving with a silent ferocity. Alara froze, fear gripping her heart. Kale's eyes snapped toward the danger, and in an instant he was gone. Before she could process it, he was back, standing in front of her, his presence shielding her from whatever had surged through the room. The attackers, creatures of shadow, their forms flickering like smoke, recoiled at his gaze. He raised a hand, and the shadows seemed to hesitate, as if his will alone commanded them. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice calm but laced with power. Alara's heart pounded, but she did as he said, instinctively trusting him even though she barely knew him. The shadows melted away under his command, retreating into the corners of the club, leaving the patrons bewildered and frightened. The music resumed, slower now, as if mourning the brief violence that had passed. Cale turned to her, his eyes still glowing faintly in the dim light. "You are not like them," he said, referring to the shadows. "You carry something different, something they cannot touch." "I don't understand," Alara whispered. "You will," he said, his voice softening in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Soon you will." They stood in silence for a moment, the thrum of the club returning to normal, but the tension between them remained. Alara's mind raced. Who was he? What did he mean by called? And what was she that even the darkness recoiled at her presence? Cale studied her for a long time. Then, without warning, he leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "The moment you cross my path, your life will never be your own again." Alara's breath caught. The words were ominous, yet she felt a thrill she couldn't name. Part of her wanted to run, to escape this unknown danger, but another part, a deeper, hidden part, wanted to follow. She wanted to know why he had chosen her, why he had looked at her as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. Before she could respond, Cale turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving her alone with a mind swirling with questions and a heart pounding like a drum. She felt the pull of the shadows again, weaker now but persistent. She realized that she had stepped into a world far larger and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Alara wandered through the club, watching the dancers, the patrons, the strange glimmers of magic she could now see in the corners of the room. She felt eyes on her, but none were Cale's. His absence gnawed at her, leaving a hollow ache she didn't understand. Every time the beat of the music dropped, she half expected him to appear beside her again, to speak those words that had lingered in her mind. "Your life will never be your own again." Finally, the night drew to a close. The neon lights outside were harsh in contrast to the soft glow inside. Alara stepped into the cool air, feeling as though she had left a dream behind. She clutched the mysterious invitation in her hand and stared at it once more. "Your destiny awaits." She didn't understand it yet, but somehow she knew it was true. A shiver ran down her spine as a shadow passed behind her, too swift to be human. And then she felt it, a presence, dark and commanding, close enough that her skin tingled. She spun around, but the street was empty. Only the echo of footsteps remained. Alara realized she had changed. Something inside her had awakened, something that had been sleeping her entire life. And she knew without doubt that Cale, the Alpha King, was at the center of it. As she walked home, questions tumbled over each other in her mind. Who was he? Why had he saved her? And what was the destiny that awaited her? She didn't know, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Her life as she had known it was over. And she was both terrified and exhilarated to see what came next. For in the shadows, unseen but ever present, Cale watched her leave. A faint smile tugged at his lips. The hunt had only just begun. And somewhere deep inside her, Alara felt the pull, a thread connecting her to him, fragile yet unbreakable. A thread that promised danger, power, and something she had never felt before, longing. The night had been just the beginning. Alara woke to a strange light filtering through tall, narrow windows. Her head ached slightly, and the city sounds she had grown used to were gone. Instead, there was a hush, like the world had paused. She sat up slowly and found herself on a wide bed covered in dark velvet sheets. The room was enormous, the walls carved from stone that shimmered faintly as if holding its own life. Candles floated in midair, their flames steady, casting gentle shadows across the chamber. For a moment she thought she was dreaming, but a soft click of a door made her heart leap. Cale entered, moving with the same silent grace she had noticed at the club. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, but there was intensity in his eyes that made her feel both exposed and protected at the same time. "You're awake," he said simply, closing the distance between them. His voice was low, smooth, and impossible to ignore. Where am I?" Alara asked, rising cautiously. This is my home, he said, or rather my world. You've crossed into it, whether by chance or fate, and now you cannot leave as easily as before. Alara's mind raced. She had no memory of how she had arrived here. The last thing she remembered was leaving the club. She wanted to run, to demand answers, but the pull of him kept her rooted. Something in his presence made the world seem smaller and her choices fewer. Why me? She asked. Why am I here? Kale's gaze softened for a brief moment, just enough for her to see a flicker of something ancient and heavy behind his eyes. You carry a gift, Alara, one you do not yet understand. It is rare and powerful, dangerous too. And for reasons I cannot fully explain yet, it belongs in this world, not the ordinary one you left behind. Alara's stomach twisted with fear and curiosity. Dangerous? What do you mean? You will see soon enough, he said. For now, you must learn. You must understand what you are and what lies ahead. He extended his hand toward her. For a long moment she hesitated, then placed hers in his. The moment their fingers touched, a strange warmth coursed through her, as if her blood itself recognized him. A pulse of energy raced along her skin, and she stumbled slightly, holding on to him for balance. Do not be afraid, Kale whispered. I will guide you, but you must trust me. The world outside the windows was nothing like the city she knew. Rolling hills of dark green stretched endlessly, dotted with towering black trees that shimmered under a pale, silver light. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky. It was both beautiful and frightening, like stepping into a painting that was alive. Alara followed Kale through long, echoing corridors. Every step seemed to awaken something beneath the stone floors, a hum of power that vibrated in her chest. She felt as if the walls themselves were watching, alive with secret knowledge and silent judgment. Where are we going? She asked. To the heart of my world, he said, where you will learn, where you will see the truth. They entered a vast hall filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected not just her image but flickers of different forms, some human, some shadowed, some twisted and unrecognizable. Alara took a step back. What is this? She asked. This is the mirror hall, Kale explained. It shows what lies within. Your fears, your strengths, the parts of yourself you have not yet met. Look closely, and you will see what you truly are. Alara hesitated but found herself drawn to a mirror that seemed to shimmer differently from the rest. Her reflection stared back, but her eyes were not her own. They glowed faintly, gold like Kale's. She gasped, stepping back, and Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. It is a part of you, he said softly. A part you have ignored, hidden even from yourself. You carry power, Alara. A light that can change the balance of this world, and the darkness fears it. Her mind spun. I don't understand, I'm just me. Kale's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. You are more than just you. And soon you will see why that matters, but power alone is not enough. You must learn control, courage, compassion, and above all, you must decide what kind of person you will be. Alara's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the corners of the hall. Shadows shifted along the walls, moving independently of the light. Her heart raced, and she clutched Kale's arm instinctively. Do not fear them, he said, though his expression hardened. They are tests, shadows that seek to unsettle you, to make you doubt yourself. Only those who confront them can grow. Alara nodded, though fear trembled in her chest. Kale raised his hand, and the shadows recoiled. Now, he said, face them. She stepped forward, shaking slightly, and as she did, the shadows coalesced into forms, shapes that mirrored her fears. She saw herself lost, alone, powerless, falling endlessly. But then Kale stepped beside her, his hand brushing against hers, grounding her. You are not alone, he said, and you are never powerless. Taking a deep breath, Alara focused on the warmth of his presence. Slowly, the shadows began to dissolve, unable to withstand her growing courage. She felt a rush of triumph, and with it, a connection to Kale that went beyond words. After the trial, Kale led her to a balcony overlooking a city she had never imagined. The night was alive with light, and the air carried a faint hum of magic. "This world," he said, "has existed alongside yours for centuries. Most humans cannot see it, but you can because you are different and because I chose to find you." Alara's heart ached with confusion and longing. "Why me?" she asked again. "Why not someone else?" Kale's expression softened almost tenderly. "Because you have something most do not: courage, resilience, and a heart that can see beyond fear. The world needs people like you, and I need you." She felt a shiver run down her spine. Need. That word, spoken by someone so powerful, carried weight she could not ignore. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she could not speak. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I will not harm you," he said quietly. "But you must understand, this path is not easy. You will face danger, shadows, betrayal, and I cannot protect you from everything. Only you can choose how to walk forward." Alara swallowed hard. Fear warred with curiosity, with the strange pull of destiny. "And if I fail," she whispered. "You will not fail," Kale said, his voice firm. "Not if you trust yourself, not if you trust me, but you must be brave enough to step into the unknown." The moment stretched between them, thick with tension, unspoken longing, and a fragile trust that neither fully understood. The silver light of the moon reflected in Kale's eyes, golden and deep, and she felt a pulse in her chest that matched his own heartbeat, steady, strong, impossible to ignore. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed from the forest beyond the palace. Shadows flickered across the balcony and a cold wind swept past them. Kale's expression darkened. "Trouble," he said. "The balance here is fragile. There are forces that seek to destroy what we are trying to protect, and they are coming." Alara's stomach knotted. She wanted to run, to hide, but she could not. She looked at Kale, at the strength and command in his presence, and felt a spark of courage she had never known. "Then I will stay," she said quietly. "I will help." Kale studied her, his golden eyes searching her soul. After a long moment he nodded, a small, approving smile tugging at his lips. "Very well," he said. "Then you will learn, and perhaps together we can face what is coming." As they stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair, Alara felt a strange sense of destiny settle in her chest. The world she had known was gone, replaced by shadows, magic, and a powerful man whose eyes seemed to see straight into her soul. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the forests and mountains, a dark force stirred, watching, waiting, sensing the awakening of something it feared. Alara took a deep breath, feeling Kale's presence behind her, steady and unwavering. "I'm ready," she whispered, though even she was not entirely sure what she meant. The night had ended, but the true journey was only beginning. The forest stretched endlessly before them, dark and alive. Shadows flickered between the trees as though the woods themselves breathed, moving with purpose, watching. Alara followed Kale carefully, her senses alert to every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind. The air was thick with magic, the kind that made her pulse quicken and her skin tingle. "This forest is not like your world," Kale said, his voice calm but firm. "Here every shadow has a mind, every tree has a memory. Nothing is truly at rest." Alara shivered, both from the chill in the air and from the weight of his words. She had never seen a place so alive, so vast, so full of unseen dangers. And yet she could not stop looking at Kale. He moved ahead of her with a natural authority, alert to every shift in the forest. She felt drawn to him, the way one is drawn to fire, both warming and dangerous. "Why am I here?" she asked again, though her voice was steadier than before. "Why me? Why am I in this world?" Kale glanced back at her, his golden eyes softening for a moment. "Because you can survive what others cannot, because you carry light that the darkness fears. And because, in ways you will soon understand, I need you." The words sent a shiver through her chest. She wanted to question him, to argue, but she found no voice. Instead, she focused on walking, keeping pace with him, feeling the strange pull of destiny in every step. They reached a clearing where the moonlight spilled across the ground, turning everything silver. Kale stopped and turned to her. "You must face your first trial," he said. "A trial not of strength but of heart." From the shadows, shapes began to form, figures that mirrored moments from her life. Fear, doubt, moments where she had felt weak or alone. She recognized herself in them, each one a reflection of insecurity she had buried. The figures moved toward her, silent and deliberate. Alara's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but Kale stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers. "Do not fight them," he said. "See them, understand them, accept them. Only then can you move forward." She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The figures surrounded her, showing memories she had tried to forget. The times she had been ignored, the moments she had been afraid, the nights she had felt utterly powerless. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she did not break. She felt Kale's hand tighten slightly around hers, and the warmth steadied her. Slowly, she began to confront the images. She whispered to herself, acknowledging her fears. "I am not weak. I am not alone. I am more than my fears." The shadows paused, as if listening. Then one by one they dissipated, melting into the moonlight. Alara felt a surge of energy, a warmth that spread through her chest and into her limbs. She had faced herself and survived. Kale smiled faintly, pride softening his features. "Good. You are stronger than you realize." Alara looked at him, her chest still racing. "Why do you believe in me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I have seen many like you," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Few survive. Few still embrace their own power. You will if you allow yourself to." The moment was intimate, charged with unspoken understanding. Alara felt a strange warmth at the sight of him, a pull that made her pulse quicken. She had never met anyone like Kale, so strong, so commanding, yet with a vulnerability that he rarely allowed anyone to see. She wanted to know him, to trust him, even as a part of her feared what it would mean. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustling in the trees. A group of dark figures emerged, creatures born of shadow and anger. Their eyes glowed with malice, and their presence made the air heavy. Kale moved instantly, placing himself between Alara and the creatures. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice low and commanding. The creatures hissed and recoiled, but their intent was clear. They wanted to test her, to strike at the new power she carried. Alara's first instinct was to run, but Kale's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "You are not powerless," he reminded her. "Remember who you are. Remember your light." Taking a deep breath, she felt the energy inside her stir. The warmth that had bloomed when she faced her fears now spread through her limbs, a quiet strength that filled her with courage. She stepped forward, raising her hands, and the creatures hesitated. The light within her pulsed outward, pushing back the darkness. The shadows shrieked softly, retreating as if recognizing a power greater than their own. Kale watched her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Well done," he said. Alara felt a rush of exhilaration, but also a new awareness of how much she had to learn. The forest seemed quieter now, as though it respected her strength. And yet, she knew this was only the beginning. They continued their journey, moving deeper into the forest, where the trees grew taller and the shadows thicker. Kale occasionally glanced at her, offering guidance, encouragement, or silent warnings. Each moment together deepened the bond between them, a tension that neither could fully name. At night, they made camp in a small clearing. Kale sat across from her, the firelight flickering across his sharp features. Alara could not stop herself from watching him, noting the way the flames danced in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. "You are changing," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Alara looked up, startled. "Changing? How?" "You are learning to see yourself clearly, to trust your instincts," he said. "Most would crumble under the trials we face today. You did not." She felt a warmth in her chest at his words, but it was mixed with unease. "And what about you?" she asked softly. "Why are you helping me? Why care?" Kale looked away, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Because if you fail, the darkness will grow stronger, and because I see something in you that I have not seen in anyone else, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for." The words settled over her like a weight and a gift all at once. She wanted to speak, to respond, but the forest's quiet seemed to hold her tongue. Instead, she simply nodded, feeling the pulse of his presence beside her. The night passed without further incident, but as dawn approached, a distant rumble shook the forest. Kale's expression darkened. "The balance here is fragile," he said. "Forces are moving against us. We are not yet safe." Alara's stomach knotted with tension, but she felt a strange courage rising inside her. "Then we face them together," she said firmly. Kale's golden eyes softened, a rare vulnerability flickering across his face. "Yes," he said, "together." The sun rose slowly over the forest, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The shadows seemed to retreat slightly, but Alara could feel their lingering presence, watching, waiting. She knew that the challenges ahead would be greater, more dangerous, but she also knew she was not alone. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that she could face what was coming. Hope that she could trust Kale. Hope that somehow, the light within her could withstand the darkness outside. As they continued through the forest, the trees seemed to bend slightly toward them, acknowledging her power. Alara felt her confidence grow, but also the weight of responsibility. She was no longer just herself. She was part of something greater, something older and more powerful than she had ever imagined. Kale walked beside her, his presence steady, his hand brushing hers occasionally, a reminder that she was not alone, that together they could face what the shadows would bring. And somewhere deeper in the forest, unseen yet aware, a dark force stirred, sensing the awakening of the power Alara carried. Its intent was clear. It would not rest until it tested her, until it forced her to confront her greatest fears. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the fire within her pulse stronger than ever. She looked at Kale, and in that moment she understood something profound. This journey was not only about survival or power or destiny. It was about trust, about courage, about embracing the unknown and the possibility of something extraordinary between them. The forest stretched endlessly before them, full of shadow and light. And together, Alara and Kale stepped forward, ready to face the trials ahead, bound by a connection neither fully understood, yet could not deny. The night of awakening was over. But the true dance of fire and ice, the struggle between light and darkness, fear and courage, destiny and choice, was only beginning. The forest had grown silent. The usual hum of magic, the whisper of leaves, the distant cry of unseen creatures, all had vanished. Alara and Kale stood at the edge of a clearing, where the ground was scorched and shadows lingered like smoke that refused to fade. The dark force that had been watching them for days had revealed itself at last, a towering figure of swirling shadow and cold light. Its presence pressed against their minds, testing their courage, their resolve, and their bond. Alara tightened her fists, feeling the pulse of power within her stir. She glanced at Kale. His stance was firm, his golden eyes glowing with determination. He had faced countless dangers before, but this was different. This entity was not just a test of strength, it was a judgment of heart, of unity, of their trust in one another. "Are you ready?" Kale asked, his voice low but steady. Alara nodded, swallowing the fear rising in her chest. "I'm ready," the shadow hissed, a sound like wind tearing through stone, and surged toward them. Its form was ever-changing, shifting between monstrous shapes and wisps of dark mist. It attacked not just with power but with fear, reaching into their minds, stirring doubts, memories, insecurities. Alara felt it first, a cold, whispering voice in her mind. "You are weak. You cannot protect him. You are not enough." She faltered, but Kale's hand found hers, grounding her. "Do not listen," he said firmly. "Together, we are stronger than it knows." She focused on his hand, on the warmth of his presence, and felt the fear begin to fade. The energy inside her rose, golden and bright, spreading from her chest to her fingertips. She could feel the bond between them, the connection that had grown over days of trials, shadows, and quiet moments of trust. Together, they were not just two people, they were a force. The shadow lunged, its form twisting around them, trying to isolate them, to sever their connection. Kale moved like lightning, his hands tracing patterns in the air that shaped energy into barriers of shimmering light. "Alara, now!" he shouted. Alara lifted her hands, letting her power flow. Light surged outward, colliding with the darkness. The shadow shrieked, twisting, recoiling, but it did not vanish. It was strong, ancient, hungry for the fear and doubt within them. Kale moved closer, their hands brushing. "We must face it together," he said. "Trust me, trust yourself." Alara nodded. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace the strength she had discovered in the forest, in the mirror hall, in every shadow that had tried to break her. Now she let her power merge with Kale's, their energies intertwining in a brilliant surge of golden light. The shadow screamed, a sound that shook the trees and rattled the ground. Its form fractured, the swirling darkness clashing with their light. The forest seemed to tremble with the struggle, but Alara held on. She felt Kale's presence steady her, his strength supporting hers, their hearts beating in tandem, a rhythm stronger than fear. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The shadow froze, hovering between collapse and resurgence. And then, slowly, the golden light pushed outward, stronger, brighter, until the darkness splintered and fell apart like shards of black glass. Alara staggered back, breathless, but Kale caught her, steadying her. The clearing was silent again, but the air felt lighter, freer, as though the forest itself had exhaled. "We did it," Alara whispered, hardly believing her own words. Kale nodded, but his expression was more solemn than triumphant. "It is never just one battle. The darkness will always linger, waiting, but today you have proven yourself and us." Alara looked at him, her chest still racing. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You would have," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've grown stronger than you know. You faced fear, doubt, and shadow, and you stood tall. That is why I trust you." For a long moment they simply stood there, letting the quiet of the forest fill the space between them. The danger had passed, but the intensity of what they had faced left a lingering pulse in their veins, a reminder of how close the edge had been. Kale's hand lingered near hers, his gaze unwavering. "Alara," he said quietly, "there is something I must tell you. About me, about who I am and what I have been." She tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" Kale's golden eyes reflected the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. "I have lived many lifetimes," he said. "I have loved and lost more than I can count. I carried a curse for centuries, one that would destroy anyone I cared for. I thought I was destined to be alone until I met you. You awakened something in me, something I thought was gone." Alara's heart tightened. "You mean you care for me?" Kale nodded. "More than I should. More than is safe, but the truth cannot be denied. You are special to me, Alara, and together we have a chance to change not just my fate but the fate of this world." Her chest warmed with emotion she could hardly name, relief, joy, longing, hope. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the steady strength in his grip. "Then we'll face it together," she said. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it as one." Kale smiled faintly, a mix of pride and quiet vulnerability. "Yes," he said, "as one." They walked back toward the fortress, the forest behind them slowly returning to its usual rhythm, shadows retreating to the corners. But Alara felt different, stronger, braver, alive in ways she had never imagined. She had discovered power, yes, but also trust, courage, and a bond that could not be broken by fear or shadow. As they reached the gates, Kale paused and looked at her. "The trials are not over," he said, "but you have passed the hardest part. You have faced the darkness, and you have done so with courage. That is rare. That is remarkable." Alara smiled softly, feeling a quiet pride bloom within her. "Then I will face whatever comes next," she said. Inside the fortress, the halls were calm, bathed in the soft glow of magic and early morning light. Kale led her to a chamber where she could rest, though neither seemed inclined to sleep just yet. They stood together by the window, looking out over the land, the kingdom that Kale had ruled in secret, the hidden world that she was now part of. "You have changed me," Kale said quietly. "I thought I knew what strength was. I thought I understood loyalty, love, and trust. You have shown me that there is more, that even an alpha king can learn to hope, to believe, to forgive." Alara reached up, touching his face gently. "And you have changed me," she said. "You showed me what I can be, that I am stronger than I thought, that I am not alone." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Neither moved closer, yet neither stepped away. They had survived the night, faced the darkness, and emerged transformed. And in that quiet, delicate tension, they understood something profound. They were bound together, not by fate alone, but by trust, courage, and the shared fire that had burned in the shadowed forest. The morning light grew stronger, spilling into the chamber. And yet, even as the world awoke, Alara felt a lingering awareness. There would be more challenges, more trials, more shadows to face. But she was ready, not alone. With Kale beside her, she could face anything. Kale turned to her, his expression soft but serious. "We have won today, but the world is still watching us. We are no longer hidden, no longer alone. There will be those who test us, who seek to challenge what we have built together." Alara nodded, her resolve firm. "Then we face them together." He smiled, a rare, full smile that lit his features. "Yes, together." They stepped closer, the space between them charged with all they had endured and all they had yet to face. And in that moment, the world outside, the forest, the shadows, the hidden forces that had threatened them, seemed smaller, less daunting, because they had discovered something stronger than fear. They had discovered trust, courage, and love that could withstand darkness. Alara rested her head against Kale's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought my life would lead me here," she whispered. Kale's hand rested on her back, holding her close. "Neither did I," he said. "But now that it has, I will not let you go." The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the fortress and the land beyond. Shadows still lingered, yes, but they were no longer alone to face them. They had each other, and together they would face whatever the world, the darkness, or destiny threw their way. And in that quiet, sacred moment, Alara understood fully. This was not just survival, not just power, not just destiny. It was transformation, redemption, a beginning that could last a lifetime. The Alpha King had set his eyes on her that fateful night, but now, together, they had set their path, and nothing could break it.